Fridays are our show about the business of music, and we have a terrific guest today. Alex Kisch is EVP of Business Development and Business Affairs and General Counsel at Vevo, one of the top companies around videos for the music business. And he'll be interviewed today by Seth Schachner, who is Managing Director at Strat Americas. Just a reminder, folks, that we're having a lot of fun with the chat, so please introduce yourselves in chat. Feel free to reach out to folks. It's been a great communication platform. We're seeing a lot of opportunities come out of the connections that are being made in chat. Also, if you have questions that are specific for Alex and Seth, please put them in the Q&A, which is right next to the chat. Oh, one other comment on chat is the default setting is set for panelists. Please change that to panelists and attendees so that everybody can see the chat. Otherwise, the only people who will see it are Alex, Seth, and myself. So you need to change from panelists to panelists and attendees. All right, have a great show. Welcome, Seth and Alex.
Thank you very much, Ned. Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, Alex, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Seth. Thank you, Ned.
So we're going to do, about a half hour of dialogue, Alex and I, and we'll be watching, the screen, the Q&A screen, as well as the chat screen. And after that, we'll go through a little bit of Q&A. So let me start out with kind of the, the obvious kind of big overlay question here. We're clearly in a time when historically probably one of the biggest disruptions ever, not just for music or video, but for tons of industry segments and verticals. Top level, it looks like a lot of people are at home for sure and consuming more and more media, audio, and looks like video as well. I mean, is Vevo in a time of disruption as well, or are you kind of gliding through this? What's sort of the experience so far during this whole pandemic for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's been disruptive, I think for the employee base, for, just people's lives in general. So it's been an adjustment to, working remotely and everything that's gone along with that. I think we've been relatively lucky, in that, from a metrics perspective, yeah, viewing has been pretty solid, and I guess in some ways, right, similar to the trends people have been seeing with Netflix and other, video content as people are home, have some time in their hands. We've seen the numbers grow pretty well there, especially on connected TV, as people are at home. So we've seen maybe with mobile not leveling out a little bit more, but connected TV extremely strong. Yeah, so we're doing okay. I'd say, to a large degree, it's business as usual. I think where we've had to make some bigger adjustments is in our content production space, where we're not able to go into our studios, and normally we're filming performance content week in, week out in New York and London, elsewhere, and so we've had to take a pause there, and just now we're kind of beginning to figure out some ways to improvise.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's good to hear that. I mean, if you think about just like the supply side of label videos or independent videos that are, I guess, they're going through the normal releasing process. I mean, you expect some disruption or rescheduling, because obviously productions are, not just original, probably disrupted out there right now.
Yeah, it's definitely something we've been thinking about, and we've been in dialogue with all our various labels and licensors. I mean, at the moment, we seem like we're in pretty good shape in terms of supply chain. There's still a good number of new videos that are coming through that have been produced for some time. So, at the moment, we're in good shape there. As if this drags on well into the summer, then we'll see. I think for us, at least, the catalog is so robust and so much viewing actually is of our catalog that, we'll take some reshuffling in terms of kind of what we push out and front and center. But, about 2/3 of viewing on Vevo platform is against catalog video. So, I think we do have that to fall back on as well.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So let's just talk. I think Vevo is a very familiar name to a lot of people, but I'm just looking at the history of the company. It's only been about 10 years since you've been around, and probably worthwhile just to do a top level little bit of background and telling everyone who Vevo is and who some of the key investors are as well.
Sure. Yeah. Vevo celebrated its 10-year anniversary just this past December. We are a joint venture, majority owned by Universal Music Group and Sony Music Entertainment. And we aggregate music video and other music related content from Sony, Universal, as well as hundreds of other labels and content producers. We monetize solely through advertising that we do in-house, and then we distribute out through a number of different channels, YouTube being far and away the biggest one. So we have been one of the biggest content partners of YouTube for the past 10 years. But then we also have a portfolio of other distribution points, mostly on connected television. And we do pretty crazy numbers in terms of views. On a global basis, we do between 800 million and 1 billion views every single day.
Oh, it's enormous. And so Warner Music is part of the offering as well, independence. You're not obviously exclusively tied to Sony and Universal.
Yeah, that's right. We work with Warner Music Group, although off of YouTube. So Warner has a direct deal on YouTube. We work with them on our other platforms, so things like Roku and Samsung TV Plus. And we work with most of the indies out there, either through aggregators like Merlin and Orchard and InGrooves and the like, and then through direct relationships with a number of them as well.
Yeah. Some of the other entities out there, man. I remember I was at Sony when it was created. Part of the, I guess, ethos was to maybe create scarcity and drive up the pricing of video, certainly CPMs. I mean, are there other just entities out in the competitive landscape? I mean, Europe's got something called Daily Motion. I've seen plenty in the Vita Primo in the Latin markets, for example, that are even remotely competitive with you guys or close on the radar in terms of your mindset. MTV maybe being an obvious one as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few out there. Excite is another one that is now just entering into the B2C space on connected television. They were mostly a B2B service. For whatever reason, no one's really done it at the scale that we have to date. And in some cases, we've been able to find ways to partner with some of these competitors. So you mentioned, MTV, I mean, historically in the past, we'd been partnered with them in syndicating videos back when websites were more of a thing. We had a relationship with them, and today Viacom owns the Pluto TV platform, and we're partnered with Pluto. So yeah, I mean, we're there are a few out there, but we also, I think, are pretty partner friendly, and are always trying to figure out if there are ways to work together in the space.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So there was kind of a big strategic shift over the last year or so. I don't know if I'd describe it as life after YouTube, but I mean, you could speak to it better yourself. But perhaps I can take a top level rather than being just purely a destination. You're a huge content provider, not trying to maybe compete with YouTube. Could you speak a little bit to the big strategic shift that you took over the last year?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and it's sort of a subtle one in a way, right? But we were putting a lot of energy, a lot of resource to trying to really build out the Vevo brand, and as you say, as a destination, the Vevo.com website, mobile apps for iOS and Android, along with some television apps, while also trying to continue to build up our presence on YouTube. I think where we ended up coming out about year and a half or so was, decision to sunset our mobile apps and our website. And I think what we found was, look, it's very hard to build a destination, and a brand takes a tremendous amount of resource and money to market. And especially when you have, an entity like a YouTube out there that's just so second nature, it's almost like a utility. That when people think of video, they think of YouTube. So I think, we came to the conclusion that our energies were going to be better spent really focusing on the YouTube partnership and what could we do to, drive more engagement, more time spent, more views there. How do we more effectively monetize and really, take advantage of that huge audience on the one hand, and then also look to where we could replicate some of that success with other scale partners, but in a way that was going to be truly incremental. So to your point, not necessarily pulling users away from YouTube, and so much activity on YouTube happens on mobile, and so the area where we saw the real opportunity was in the living room through connected televisions and over-the-top platforms and otherwise. In part because, well, YouTube does play a pretty big role, has a pretty big presence on connected TV itself, but there still just seemed like a lot of opportunity to grow new audiences, to deliver a different experience that's more lean back and programming based, specifically for television. And it's a place where our, the videos that we represent and distribute just, it really does them justice through, they're mostly shot in HD or better, and they look beautiful on the big screen. And it's also just, as an area, especially over the last couple of years, where there's been a tremendous amount of development of just new initiatives, and the public is really beginning to take OTT, take connected TV, I'd say more seriously than they have in the past. And you see a lot of audience moving there.
Sure, and especially these days. So let's just speak a little bit about the business model. So it's purely advertising driven monetization. Are there any premium subscription plays or thoughts to do that along the lines of what some of the audio services have done? Or
no, it's purely ad supported, and we're pretty content with that business model. We've spent some time taking a look at subscription, and we gave it some thought, but ultimately we feel like for a music video service, the advertising has worked really well. We're able to gain super premium CPMs, sell at a very high level. And for a variety of reasons, personally, I think, it's hard to attach a paid subscription to a music video only service anyway. And I think to some degree there's potentially, I think right now we may be going through a bit of subscription exhaustion, call it, where you have, even more with your Disney Pluses and your HBO Maxes and everything else. There's some fatigue around it in some sense, I think, from consumers of, even if it may at the end of the day be a better buy from them, there's a sense of there's only so many subscriptions they're going to be willing to support at any given time.
Totally. And so, and just on the sales side, so I mean, there's obviously, you have your own sales forces, I assume, but you're a pretty global. I know some of the territories in Latin America you're really active in. Is it all you selling it, or are the YouTube and the Google folks selling some piece? Sort of how does the sales kind of revenue pie kind of split out in terms of the teams and the operations, just top level?
Yeah, we have our own sales teams based both in the U.S. and the U.K. actually, as well as Australia. So in the U.S., we're in New York and L.A. and Chicago and San Francisco and even Miami now. And so, the bulk of our sales comes from Vevo sold on the YouTube platform. We share sales with them, so some is coming from their side. I'd say, our approach and their approach is a bit different in that, you know, we are selling solely premium music video. It's what we're focused on. YouTube, Google is obviously selling a massive platform. And so when it works well, it's fairly complementary, the way the two sort of sales teams can work together and have, you know, different goals. We are in London, we're able to sell cross-border into a lot of Europe in a way that's been actually, you know, surprisingly successful for us. But as we get into the further reaches of the world, out into Asia, and we rely more heavily on Google in those markets.
I see.
And off YouTube for the most part, you know, we are doing the majority of the selling there as well.
I see. So your team presented a pretty interesting paper. We talked about it a little bit earlier for the call. It was in the Sandbox Summit in New York, but it's a pretty richly detailed study that I can't go into right in great detail. But it looked like, you know, one of the main messages was that you know, brands seem to resonate a little more heavily, a little more better with music video viewers, completely top level. Any sense on the caramel behind that? If what's driving it, what your experience has been?
Well, I mean, I think in part it's, you know, it's really the content and the breadth and strength of it, and the fact that it's, you know, recording artists are huge celebrities that just garner a lot of attention, right? I mean, we trade in pop culture, and, you know, we are very lucky in that our content doesn't really go out of season. And the fact that, you know, because we represent the industry at large, Universal Music Group and all their labels, Sony Music and all their labels, Warner Music Group and their labels, and on, and all the independents, it's a very rich and, you know, never-ending font of kind of amazing content that comes out day in, day out, week in, week out. And so in any given week, we really can count on having, you know, at least one major release by a, you know, a household name, a global superstar.
Right.
And, you know, even if you think of big television or movie studios, you know, they have hits and they have misses as we do as well. But I think we are very lucky, very privileged to, because we cut across, you know, all these various studios and labels, you know, it's just such a deep catalog and supply, and it just doesn't go out of style, right? I mean, music doesn't go out of style, even where a particular genre, a particular artist will, but in the next week we're going to come back with something super strong, and it just, you know, it resonates with audiences, with young audiences especially. And so I think it you know, it makes our jobs that much easier to be representing something that's, you know, super premium, not seasonal, and that just comes, you know, we are trading in a very valuable audience.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just promotional videos that are coming out. You've done quite a few cool things with new artists, the Lift program, Billie Eilish. I've seen quite a bit of sort of independent or original programming that you, not just over COVID-19, but over the last year or two. Be cool to hear that out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something we've been doing since inception. For the last 10 years, we produce a good amount of original programming ourselves. It's taken different shapes over the years, but these days, mostly focusing on performance-based content and mostly focusing on developing artists. And I think in 2019, we produced about 720 pieces of original content from about 350 different artists. So you referenced Discover, for instance, is our developing artists platform, where, you know, we in some cases even pick unsigned artists, or at least artists who are pretty new and generally unknown. We shoot a bunch of original content in our studios, and push out about every week piece of content, and we tend to alternate between US based and European or Latin based artists, and we've seen some great success stories there. I mean, You know, people like Sam Smith, who, you know, started out virtually unknown there super early. Louis Capaldi is another one.
Sure.
And then kind of graduated through a number of our programs. Billie Eilish was another one that we were, you know, super early with. And so it's not like we were, can take sole credit for any of these artists' success, but, you know, it's about at least trying to be supportive early on, being part of that story.
Yeah. I mean,
so yeah, it's been a really important part of the business for us.
I mean, I found I work for a social music community myself, and you know, I find the space, I mean, to be increasingly crowded, at least for the new competition, just to get an artist's attention these days, with everyone from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok. So it's, I don't know if you have a leg up on that, just given your positioning with the labels, but it's not a space where there's no competition for sure, right? Once you start getting out of your core business, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big challenges is, right, there's tremendous amount of content that's produced, and what can we do that's going to stand out, especially when, you know, typically an artist who's going out supporting an album or a tour is going to kind of, you know, make the stops. If they're in New York, they're going to stop by Vevo and shoot something. They're probably also going to stop by the Spotify studios, by Pandora,
Sure.
by MTV, right? So, you know, we've definitely been trying to figure out, you know, how do we create something that feels recognizable, somewhat unique, and we've been trying to, you know, through a particular look. For instance, we have, you know, studio space in New York and in London, and we've created sets for Discover in both places that capture a singular look, right, one way. So, you know, over time, through graphics, through the studio, through the shooting style, you know, trying to create something that's at least recognizable, and sort of build that brand and that sense of, okay, when I see a Discover piece of content, I know what it is. So I think we've been pretty successful, especially in the last couple of years at that, and kind of coupling that with trying to be more and more focused on you know, data and experimentation. We have an amazing data science team and business operations team in-house who do a ton of work, just looking at the data, looking at what's working, looking at the trends, and studying especially YouTube and its algorithm and how it behaves and changes over time. And so trying to, you know, use that in ways to inform our content producers internally as far as what's working, what's not, and, you know, everything from production itself to the thumbnails we place around, you know, music videos in general, but, you know, how we title, how we, in fact, I mean, it's funny because, you know, we used to spend a lot of time coming up with, you know, catchy brand names for the various things we've produced. And as you'd imagine, you know, you have a bunch of people sitting in a room running through. And in more recent times, we've come to calling a lot of our original content, you know, things like official performance, which seems really boring. And what's wrong with us? Why are we so adept creatively? But there's method to the madness, right? I mean, what we found is, you know, so much of our viewing is driven by algorithmic choices and recommendations. And, you know, we've seen the differences between, you know, when you have language and titling and keywords that are, you know, more descriptive than a clever titling, we actually have done much better. So, you know, calling something out as official performance video has gone a long way versus, you know, calling it some other clever name.
Got it. No, that's got to be from a whatever user retention, user acquisition growth point of view, perhaps a smarter, better strategy than just going out and trying to buy things or acquire things through other partnerships, I guess. You mentioned connected TVs. I was just a little bit curious about that. I mean, you've got quite a few actually out in there. Roku, you mentioned, Pluto from Viacom. Is that stuff starting to really hit the radar in a big way and help your growth story?
Totally. Yeah, it's been a really big focus. I mean, myself personally, something I've been working very focused on for the last year or so. So we're on about 10 different platforms in addition to YouTube across all their platforms. In some instances, they are Vevo branded VOD apps on Roku, on Apple TV, on Fire TV, Sky Q, and a number of other platforms. But we've also been rolling out purely linear channels in the past few months. So we have 5 different genre-based 24/7 linear channels on Samsung TV Plus platform. We have a channel on the Pluto TV platform. We've just recently launched a new channel on the Zumo platform, and we've got a bunch others in the works and a pretty ambitious pipeline we're working through now. So I'd say, in the next, call it 4 to 6 months, we'll be announcing a number of other big partnerships there.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting. It's been really fun, and just to have the opportunity to program in a linear way. It's a new challenge, but new opportunity, and early numbers have been super encouraging for us.
Yeah, I mean, got to be right now one of the only perhaps positive things. People are discovering new ways to consume and acquire content. We just throw out a reminder to everyone out there. Looks like we've got a good group, 70 or so. We're going to do a Q&A pretty soon. I think Ned has asked us to. There is a Q&A screen to fill those things out in. So shoot your questions our way for Alex, for me, whatever, and we'll call you out and answer them. Okay. And Ned, I don't know if you guys want to circulate. We have a little fun poll if you want to send that around now as well. Just maybe before we go into the Q&A. There we go. And I tried to curate a little bit of this, Alex, just along the lines of kind of the new platforms and connected TV stuff that's out there. But, where do you typically go to watch a music video? YouTube, MTV, an artist's website, social network, TikTok. Now, here's a good one. And for those of us who go back a little bit, was just what music brand do you most closely associate with music videos? I think I can guess what that's going to go as well. And sort of to this earlier discussion of what platform do you typically use to watch a music video? So
I love it. Free market research.
Yeah. And have you ever used Samsung TV Pluto? And usually you put a funny one in there. So last week we had something about how many of you watch Tiger King. So I don't know. We didn't seem to get that one in there, but go ahead and fill that out. And let's see if we've got any, we got some questions filling up here. All right. Well, someone who doesn't want to be named, that's okay. What type of sponsorship integrations, does Vevo execute with brands?
So we do, a number of different types of sponsorships. Premieres for us, new premieres of big videos coming in is a bigger area for us, and we attack those in a bunch of different ways. But a lot of what we're doing these days is selling in an upfront manner, similar to the way it works in television, where we'll go out as part of kind of the upfront season and look to land commitments across the major holding companies for the agencies, and get commitments across a number of different buys, so that they can take a number of different forms. In some instances, we may do like sponsorships tied to a particular artist, a premiere, or especially for the household names, the Taylors and the Justins and so forth. But in other instances, we may just be selling more of audience segments or genres, or takeovers of certain parts of the platform, or things like that. And as we now are getting more into the TV space, as Seth was just talking about, we're beginning to also look at segmenting out parts of the platform, and so offering up ways to buy Vevo across television, which would be everything from Roku to Samsung to Pluto to YouTube on TV.
Just to follow up, and hoping this isn't a sensitive question, but in terms of when sponsorships come in, is that that's typically something between Vevo and perhaps its partners for the videos, or artists ever party to something like that, or name and likeness or endorsement things come in on the part of individual artists? Or
I mean, typically sponsorships will come through, Vevo's relationships with brands and agencies. And, we work closely with artists and labels and artist reps to make sure, we're not getting into endorsement issues, or if there's, from time to time, you'll have an artist who has a relationship with a telco, say, if they are have an endorsement deal. And so we'll want to make sure we're not introducing a competing
right.
brand or something like that, or so. Yeah, I mean, we have a whole kind of set of parameters we work with, and we have, day in, day out, we have teams who are working with artists and labels to make sure that we're respecting their wishes.
It's got to be an important consideration, just given that everyone's in that pool trying to do the same thing, I would imagine. So
absolutely.
Matthew Thomas has asked what do you think about the live streaming business, the live concert and content world, which has been taken off lately, Twitch, Gig, all sorts of platforms that are out there. Are you any expectations about entering that?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's been great to see, as a fan, and just, as obviously the artists in the industry has been really sidelined with COVID-19 and in the last weeks, which has been devastating. So, I mean, it's been really cool just to see artists who are finding all kinds of ways to stay connected to their fans. And then sometimes, right, this takes the form of, just an artist uploading something to their phone versus some of the bigger, more organized events we've seen lately. So, we've begun to get involved a bit. We've done, I think, in the last couple of weeks, 6 or 7 maybe live streams on Instagram. We're doing it mostly with, again, developing artists who don't necessarily have that big an audience, and it's, where can we bring value to them, right? So if we can take the following we have on an Instagram or one of the other social platforms, or on YouTube, and and let them use that as a platform to reach their fans that they might not otherwise be able to do, we're at least offering that up. For a huge artist with a tremendous fan base, truth is they probably have a greater following than we would on the socials. So, we're not necessarily going to be as helpful. So we are working on some, so I call them adaptations of some of our formats that we normally produce. They won't necessarily be live, but working with artists at home and finding ways to create something that we can ultimately work with them and edit and turn into something that's going to be, feel pretty production rich. But it's actually pretty exciting. I mean, we've got the first one of these coming out in a couple of weeks, and kudos to our team for coming up with some really creative ways to keep keep things going on that front and working from afar.
Cool, makes a lot of sense. And Ned asked a question, actually a good one that kind of plays into this, just about budgets in general. I mean, maybe even to start before this pandemic happened, were there budget ranges or criteria that Vevo would, I don't know if requires the right word, or look to, and what do you think about budgets just going forward in general? Do you expect it to shake out given all this at-home production that's happening, or what's sort of the vision there for that Vevo's looking at?
Well, I mean, in terms of the music videos that are produced by our licensors, by the record labels, I mean, so that's really, I mean, we don't have a lot of input or say over those. And I think, there's typically a pretty broad range, right? From your developing artist to your superstar. Certainly on the superstar side, we're seeing some pretty big budget productions when, you're a Taylor or a Rihanna, Beyonce, right? But we're able to do a lot with what we produce in-house for fairly modest budgets. It was Discover and Lift and the things that we can do in studios. We can do for you know, in the certainly the 5 digit,
Yeah,
low 5
sure.
digit
Yeah,
ranges. You know, whether the live streams and things people are doing from home ends up having a lasting effect. You know, it'll be interesting to see, right? It may be,
yeah,
depending on how long this go, it may be an interesting lesson that you know, artists can actually do a lot when they're kind of left to themselves. Um, I think we'll continue to see big budget videos being produced going forward, but I think what I'm be excited for and I would encourage is to see more, call it ancillary shoulder content being produced by artists, so that especially, you know, there are only so many videos that tend to come out around a particular release. And one of the things we encourage our artists and label partners to do is just to try to find ways to increase the number of releases, whether it's through, you know, lyric videos or behind the scene footage, or, you know, other types of shoulder content that could help complement and
yeah,
contextualize what they're otherwise doing. So I would hope that the flurry of activity here maybe is lasting
yeah.
in that way.
Yeah, just a reminder, everyone out there, load up your questions in the Q&A, because we got a few more minutes here, and we've got just one more question. So I'm sure there's others out there, but let me lob one in, just in terms of, you know, like if the audio streaming business is, I don't know if the best example, but you know, there's so much audio content that's available. You can load up through a Mondo Tunes or a TuneCore or whatever the distribution vehicle is, and be up on an audio streaming service and pretty quickly. Is it very different for Vevo? You curate and screen, and you have a much smaller volume of catalog up there, or how does it work on your platform?
Yeah, certainly the bar to entry is a bit higher just in terms of production, and frankly even just, you know, uploading and the size of the files and all that. So it's interesting because TuneCore, you called out, had experimented in a few years ago, started to look to take music video from their clients as well, and then ended up backing away from it. You know, we do work with like Vidya is a company we work closely with, who, you know, has a fairly low bar to entry. You know, most artists can create videos and upload to Vidya. We have worked with them over the years to kind of find that balance between not being inundated with thousands and thousands of titles and having to you know, tighten up a curation a bit.
Sure.
So we've created some you know, some thresholds just around certain metrics, just so that we feel like, you know, it's a bit of a tightrope walk between wanting to be as, you know, open to any artist who has a video, and but also, you know, to make sure the quality is of a certain level,
Yeah.
and that it can break through. But we've got about 400,000, between 400 450,000 videos in the catalog today, and it grows at a pretty healthy clip week to week.
Cool. No, that's cool. So we got a question from Patty Jones, who kind of builds out on this theme, but just, you know, could you speak maybe to criteria for developing artists, you know, selections on the Discovery platform? And do you have an A&R staff that curates this, or, you know, does the artist
Yeah.
need to come through the door with metrics right away?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we've got basically an A&R team who does programming and who curates, and you know, they're the ones who are the gatekeepers for programs like Discover and Lift. And you know, as these programs have evolved, yeah, they become pretty competitive. So I mean, we get submissions from labels and artist managers, you know, who are vying for one of these spots. Lift is another one of our developing programs, but at kind of a higher level, and we only do a certain number a year, so the competition's that much greater. And it's a mix of the things you'd probably expect, right? I mean, it's, you know, looking at a variety of kind of metrics that are available, you know, on social media and what they're doing in audio, and also trying to make sure we're getting a mix across geographies and genres to some degree. You know, we do want to make sure we're representing the territories where we we have users, so not take everything from the US and not even necessarily take all English speaking music. So I think we've been making greater efforts to really try to cut across and be representative across genres, geographies, and so forth.
I mean, for sure. I've seen, I work the Latin markets pretty heavily, and so much of the, the most popular explosive stuff has come through pretty non-traditional, channels. Artists like Osuna, or, the Colombian reggaeton artists, or they might find a label at some point, but they also just might start through independent interest, basically. So I don't, that means you're going to, occasionally there'll be competitors out there they might break through, but that's got to be a key thing to make sure you're not missing out on, basically.
Yeah, and we're getting some great, somewhat surprising success from different places. I mean, we've had a French hip hop artist who really crossed over, and I think we're, as an industry, right, we're seeing that more and more in the last few years is this much greater cross-pollination and music that's coming from, call it, less likely markets, and certainly in the Latin space, but not only in the Latin space, right? And we're seeing, music coming from East Asia that's playing really well in Latin America. And, so there's a bunch of surprises, I think, but I think it's becoming a bit more the norm as the world is becoming, more connected and smaller in a lot of ways. Obviously through audio platforms like Spotify as well, there's just the level of discovery is also so much greater that people are able to find things that aren't necessarily being, fed to them in a mass kind of way. It's fascinating to me.
No, for sure. For me too. It's certainly, even to just locate who an artist manager is or who's decision maker these days has got to be, whether it's a video or just the artist doing something for you, can be a mind bender. Miriam Koch has asked an interesting question. I'm not sure it's the best timing, but she's asked if you've ever considered curating a music festival. Lots of other music brands and platforms over the past few weeks have been curating their own during this time. I think she probably means online, but has that idea come up at all?
We've looked at some of those things in the past. We've looked at some award shows. We've done, actually, I referenced the Lyft program we've done for many, many years. So we have produced something over the years called Lyft Live, where we take at least the various Lyft artists we've worked with, bring them together on one stage. We've tied it to Halloween events in the past and done it in different locations. So yeah, I'd say at the moment, we're kind of looked and pulled back, I'd say, to some degree around some of the really big investments in sort of ticketed live audience things, just because frankly the return on investment we find tends to be a little better when we're a bit more modest and work with smaller developing artists. It's ones where we feel like we're making a much bigger difference for them. We can take them from, a pretty small audience to a much more significant one. Whereas and not to say you couldn't do a festival with developing artists, but, as much as we still work with tier A big artists, but we also feel like, we're happy to work with them. It's great to give them an additional outlet and find ways to do what, to realize their vision. But it also, frankly, just doesn't,
no, look, I mean, I think everyone's got their own core expertise. For sure. I think everyone has their core expertise, and you clearly got a great one. So it's an interesting idea, Miriam. When we talked a little bit about connected TV, and Sean Doherty out there sounds like he's got a very robust understanding of the advertising business, perhaps comes out of that. So has asked about what you're seeing just in terms of results, impressions, CPMs, pricing on the connected TV side of things compared to what you're seeing on mobile or YouTube or some of the more traditional platforms.
Hey, Sean. I'd say, it's probably a little early to get into, break out connected TV, and we're kind of early to the game and thinking about it as kind of a separate segment versus kind of selling the whole platform. So our CPMs tend to be, you know, relative to the industry, and certainly relative to the world of digital, you know, on the higher end, and continuing to be pretty steady there. We don't really put it out publicly, and especially, you know, I won't want to compare it necessarily to what we're seeing by others on other platforms. But I mean, I'll just say, you know, and it sounds self-serving, but I mean, you know, it's been so far really encouraging what we're seeing on connected TV, and it's something where, you know, we think it's something worthwhile continuing to make real investments there.
Yeah, makes a lot of. I think you need to get people to discover it and start using it in a significant way. That's a nice step forward, you know, in many respects. I just remember the mobile phone when it wasn't really a vehicle for anything, and we used to preload it with music, and that even of itself was a huge step. So, well, we've only got a couple more minutes left, and it looks like there's just a few other questions. So let me ask. It looks like the Rosemary Empuero Jacobs has asked a really good one, a big one, which is you know, just thinking out after we get through this crazy period, this pandemic. You know, what will be the positive change for the industry, you know, for artists, for fans? I mean, what do you see what does Vevo see as the upside once we get through this horrible pandemic we're in the middle of right now?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think, and it sounds kind of corny, right? But I think one of the silver linings, one of the positives we are seeing is that, you know, a lot of instances of I think people feeling the need to connect and reach out. I know in my experience, like I'm getting a lot of, you know, calls from people I haven't heard from a long time who are checking in, and you know, I feel like trying to pay that back. I think specifically in the music industry, well, we're seeing, you know, a lot of industry bodies and companies and people stepping up from a charitable perspective. And I think we're seeing a lot of just kind of fans getting an intimate peek into the lives of some of the artists that they love.
Yeah.
And the artists, frankly, I think have been, you know, extremely generous and open, right? And I think, you know, because they're at home, they thrive on performing, on being out on the road and being connected to fans. So yeah, I think it's just been fascinating to, you know, be able to tune in at any time of day, and suddenly I'm, you know, watching Norah Jones take requests in her living room, and I feel like I'm relating to her on another level as a fan. And so, you know, I guess I hope that there's a way to continue to harness some of that, and, you know, carry through some of those positives into a post-COVID world. Not totally sure what that will look like, but I do feel like there's some good feeling that can kind of continue to carry through there.
I think it's an awesome point. You know, I think that degree of artist and fan connectivity is going to be enhanced. I mean, I've seen a lot of it just through some of these social, you know, platforms, Smule, Instagram, you know, certainly Facebook, just where that connection with the artist and their audience may be more important than even the recorded music rights or the copyrights. And, you know, they can be monetized. And I think to some degree, even though right now you're seeing, you know, people are home producing content, it's not necessarily what the most ideal form of production. It'll be enhanced as well. And I think that's a good thing, basically. And if people discover things like connected TV or, you know, other means of paying artists directly through Venmo, this is all good stuff, basically. We've just got like a minute or two left, and I guess Ned is going to show the poll here. There's if we have the minute, Nick Blake has asked maybe a funny thing for us to end on, which is got a long history of working in the music business. You have a real quick, funniest, perhaps most surprising experience you want to share?
A few years ago, I guess this files under sort of surprising. I was on a call, and we were with a representative of Prince. And believe it or not, I think it's okay to say at this point, but I think we were in discussions with Prince about creating an original program, like picture kind of a Johnny Carson-like show where Prince was going to be Johnny and have a bunch of guests on, and he would talk to them and he would jam with them, and it sounded kind of awesome. And there were a couple other people on the call from his camp, and talking about Prince doing this and Prince doing that. And about 5 minutes before the call ended, I had the realization suddenly that one of the guys from his camp was actually Prince, talking about himself in the third person. I had heard that he will do this from time to time, and he likes to sort of be a fly on the wall and drop in on calls that his representatives are having. So never actually got to meet him, but it turns out we were having a conversation without my actually knowing it, which I still to this day find kind of funny.
All right, awesome. Well, I definitely got some more to share. We've shared them at Ned's dinners in New York before.
We do have a whole show on stories. Maybe that's a good idea. Let's talk about that.
I think it's online, whatever. So
that's a good one, Alex. Listen, folks. To Alex and Seth's point, we really enjoy being connected with you every day here. Stay safe. Have a good weekend. If you can get outside, if you can get away from a screen a little bit, try that too. It can be refreshing. We'll be back on Monday. We have a whole week planned next week. We'll have Curiosity Stream on Monday. We have Super Awesome on Tuesday. We have my good friend Damon Lau, who runs the esports division at UTA on Wednesday. So there's a lot of good stuff coming. Stay safe, folks. Have a good one. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks all. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Be well.
guys.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Alex.
everyone.
Yep.